The Galactic Preparatory Academy's gleaming spires towered against the violet sky of Centauri Prime, a beacon of interstellar education that had stood for over 3 centuries. Inside one of its many lecture halls, Mika Hargreaves slouched in her seat, trying to make herself as inconspicuous as possible. As the only human in the entire academy, the first Earthling ever admitted, she had grown accustomed to the stares, the whispers, and the way other students gave her a wide berth in the corridors. Today's xenobiology class was supposed to be about hostile environments across the galaxy, but Mika had a sinking feeling in her stomach as Professor Zilk adjusted his 6-fingered hands over the holographic display. The title of today's lecture appeared in shimmering letters above his head: Deathworlds and Their Inhabitants, Survival Adaptations of Class 12 Planetary Species. Mika's heart sank. Earth was classified as a Class 12 planet, a Deathworld. Today, Professor Zilk began, his translucent skin pulsing with green and blue patterns of excitement. We will examine the most fascinating and terrifying examples of evolutionary adaptation in the galaxy. Beings that have survived environments so hostile that most civilized species would perish within minutes of exposure. A ripple of nervous anticipation spread through the classroom. Students of various species, some with multiple limbs, others with iridescent exoskeletons, a few that appeared to be nothing more than floating clouds of luminescent gas, shifted in their ergonomic seats. We begin with perhaps the most notorious Deathworld in the charted galaxy. Professor Zilk continued, his voice dropping dramatically. Sol-3, known to its inhabitants as Earth. Mika felt her cheeks burn as several students turned to look at her. She fixed her gaze firmly on her tablet, pretending to take notes. The holographic display shifted to show Earth, beautiful and blue, rotating slowly. Then the image zoomed in, displaying various landscapes, dense jungles, scorching deserts, frozen tundras, storm-lashed oceans. This single planet contains environments of such extreme variation that most species would require completely different biological adaptations for each region. And yet, its apex predator, humans, have managed to survive and even thrive across all of these hostile territories. The display shifted again, showing images of Earth's predators, sharks cutting through water, tigers stalking through grass, venomous snakes coiled to strike. The planet's biodiversity is unlike anything we've seen elsewhere, with millions of species competing in an endless evolutionary arms race. The predators of Earth have developed offensive capabilities that would be considered biological weapons on most civilized worlds. Images flashed by: the crushing jaw strength of crocodiles, the lethal venom of box jellyfish, the lightning-fast strikes of mantis shrimp. But most terrifying of all are the apex predators that emerged from this evolutionary crucible: humans. The display showed humans engaged in various activities: rock climbing sheer cliffs without safety equipment, diving into crushing ocean depths, surviving in the most extreme environments on Earth. Humans evolved on a high-gravity world with extreme temperature variations, constant exposure to carcinogenic solar radiation, and an atmosphere teeming with pathogenic microorganisms. Their bodies are reinforced with an internal skeleton of calcium, allowing them to withstand impacts that would shatter most species. Their skin contains specialized cells that absorb radiation damage and repair it. Their immune systems are constantly at war with thousands of microscopic invaders. Mika couldn't take it anymore. She raised her hand. Professor Zilk paused, his skin pattern shifting to a surprised yellow. Yes, Student Hargreaves? Professor, Mika said, her voice steadier than she felt. I think there's a mischaracterization here. Humans aren't apex predators in the traditional sense. We're omnivores, and our success comes more from our intelligence and social cooperation than from physical adaptations. The professor's skin flashed a dismissive purple. Your perspective is understandable, given your species' self-perception. However, the objective classification is clear. Humans can survive conditions that would kill most sentient species. You can consume substances that would be toxic to most of the students in this room. Your endurance exceeds that of nearly every known spacefaring species. But that doesn't make us monsters, Mika protested. I never use the term monster, Professor Zilk replied coolly. I'm simply presenting scientific facts about Deathworld species. The ability to survive in hostile conditions is admirable, if somewhat primitive. Mika felt her face flush with anger and embarrassment. She wanted to argue further, but the stares of her classmates made her sink back into her seat. This wasn't the first time she'd been treated as a curiosity, a specimen rather than a student, but it stung nonetheless. The lecture continued, with Professor Zilk describing humans as if they were fascinating but dangerous animals, emphasizing their aggressive tendencies and territorial behavior while downplaying their art, culture, and scientific achievements. When class finally ended, Mika gathered her things quickly, hoping to escape before anyone could ask her invasive questions about human biology or behavior. But as she reached the door, she felt a gentle tap on her shoulder. She turned to find Maz, a centaurian with silvery skin and large, multifaceted eyes, standing awkwardly behind her, unlike most students, who avoided her. Maz had been cautiously friendly since orientation. That was uncomfortable, Maz said, his voice melodic and soft. Professor Zilk tends to sensationalize for effect. Mika shrugged. I'm used to it by now. You shouldn't have to be, Maz replied. Listen, a group of us are going on a field study to Lunex 3 next week. It's a training exercise in xenobiological sample collection. You should join us. I don't think that's a good idea, Mika said, remembering how her last group project had ended, with her teammates refusing to make physical contact with her after rumors spread that human skin secreted toxic oils. It would be a chance to show what humans are really capable of. Maz pressed, Professor Zilk is leading the expedition. Maybe seeing you in action would change his perspective. Mika hesitated. She had come to the Galactic Preparatory Academy to learn. Yes, but also to represent Earth, to pave the way for more humans to join intergalactic society. How could she do that if she kept hiding whenever she felt uncomfortable? All right, she said finally. I'll go. Excellent! Maz's skin rippled with silver patterns of delight. I'll add your name to the roster. As Maz walked away, Mika wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Back in her dormitory, Mika found her roommate Zixel already there. Her 6 legs curled beneath her as she hovered over her studies. Zixel, an arachnoid from Proxima B, had requested a room change when she discovered she would be sharing with a human, but the housing administration had denied it due to space limitations. How was your day? Mika asked, trying as always to be friendly despite the chill between them. Zixel's multiple eyes blinked in sequence. Adequate. I heard you volunteered for the Lunex 3 expedition. News traveled fast. Yes, I did. Why? It's a hostile environment, toxic atmosphere, unstable terrain, indigenous predators. Mika smiled thinly. Sounds like home. Zixel's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or annoyance. Mika still couldn't tell the difference. Perhaps you will be useful then. The rest of us have only experienced such environments in simulations. Is that a compliment? Mika asked, surprised. An observation, Zixel replied, turning back to her studies. It wasn't friendship. but it was the closest thing to approval Zixel had ever expressed. Mika counted it as progress. Over the next week, Mika prepared for the expedition, researching Lunex 3 and its hazards. The moon orbited a gas giant in a nearby star system, its atmosphere rich in methane and sulfur compounds, its surface dotted with geothermal vents and caustic lakes. For most species, it was a nightmarish environment requiring extensive protective gear. For Mika, it sounded like a more extreme version of some of Earth's volcanic regions. When the day of the expedition arrived, Mika met the group at the Academy's shuttle bay. 12 students had volunteered, representing a diverse cross-section of galactic species. Professor Zilk stood before them, his skin a professional shade of blue. Today's excursion will test your ability to observe, analyze, and collect samples in a hostile environment, he announced. You will be working in pairs. Safety is paramount. Follow protocols and stay with your assigned partner at all times. He began calling out pairs of names. Mika waited anxiously, wondering who would be stuck with her. Hargreaves and Zixel, Professor Zilk called finally. Mika looked over at her roommate in surprise. Zixel's expression was unreadable, but she moved to stand beside Mika without protest. I requested you, Zixel said quietly. You are familiar with hostile environments. I wish to observe your methods. Oh, Mika said, oddly touched. Well, I'll do my best not to disappoint. The shuttle ride to Lunex 3 was brief but tense. As they approached the moon's turbulent atmosphere, the craft shuddered and bucked. Several students looked ill, their various physiologies reacting poorly to the turbulence. Mika, who had grown up with Earth's weather extremes, found it no worse than a thunderstorm over the Atlantic. They landed on a relatively stable plateau overlooking a valley of steaming vents and bubbling pools. Through the shuttle's viewport, Mika could see the poisonous yellow clouds swirling above, illuminated by the distant star and the massive gas giant that dominated the sky. Environmental suits on and checked before we disembark, Professor Zilk instructed. Communicate through your suit comms only. The atmosphere will damage exposed respiratory systems within seconds. The environmental suits were bulky but well designed, with reinforced joints and transparent helmets that provided a full field of vision. Mika's felt constraining, designed as it was for the galactic standard body type rather than human proportions. As they filed out of the shuttle and onto the rocky surface of Lunex 3, Mika felt a surge of excitement despite her discomfort. This was what she had dreamed of as a child, exploring alien worlds, standing where no human had stood before. Professor Zilk distributed sample collection kits and assigned each pair a specific area to investigate. Mika and Zixel were directed to a series of small geothermal vents about half a kilometer from the landing site. Stay within visual range of at least one other team, Professor Zilk warned, and maintain constant communication. Any sign of indigenous predatory life forms, you report immediately and return to the shuttle. As they set off across the uneven terrain, Mika noticed that Zixel was moving awkwardly, her normally graceful six-legged gait hampered by the environmental suit. Are you okay? Mika asked through the comm. This protective equipment is not designed for my species. Zixel replied, a note of frustration in her voice. The joints restrict my movement. Let me know if you need help, Mika offered. They reached their assigned location and began setting up the portable analysis equipment. The ground beneath them trembled occasionally as pressurized gas escaped from the vents, releasing clouds of sulfurous steam into the already toxic air. I'll collect the first sample, Mika said, approaching one of the smaller vents cautiously. She used a specialized tool to scrape a thin layer of mineral deposits from the vent's rim, then sealed it in a collection vial. Your movements are confident, Zixel observed. You do not hesitate near the hazard. Mika shrugged, the gesture lost in her bulky suit. On Earth, we have similar features: volcanoes, geysers, hot springs. I've done fieldwork in those environments before. They worked methodically, collecting samples from various vents and the surrounding soil. Mika found herself enjoying the process and Zixel's company. The arachnoid was observant and efficient, and seemed to be genuinely interested in Mika's experiences on Earth. These mineral formations are similar to those found in the Yellowstone caldera back home, Mika explained as they examined a particularly colorful deposit. Extremophile bacteria create these colors by metabolizing the sulfur compounds. Your planet harbors life even in such hostile conditions? Zixel asked, sounding impressed. Earth life is remarkably adaptable. Mika replied, there are organisms living in volcanic vents at the bottom of our oceans, in pools of acid, in radioactive waste. Life finds a way. As one of our scientists famously said, their conversation was interrupted by a sudden, violent tremor that nearly knocked them off their feet. Mika grabbed Zixel's arm to steady her as the ground continued to shake. All teams, report status. Professor Zilk's voice came through the comm, tight with concern. The various pairs checked in, confirming they were unharmed. But before the last team could respond, a deafening crack split the air, and a fissure opened in the plateau near the shuttle. Return to the landing site immediately, Professor Zilk ordered. The geological activity is increasing beyond predicted levels. Mika and Zixel packed their equipment quickly and began making their way back toward the shuttle. The tremors continued, making the journey treacherous. Twice. Zixel stumbled, her suit-constrained legs struggling with the increasingly unstable ground. Lean on me, Mika offered, providing her shoulder for support. As they crested a ridge, they saw the shuttle below, and the widening fissure that now separated it from most of the student teams. Professor Zilk and 3 students had made it back, but the others were scattered across the plateau, trying to find a safe path across the growing chasm. The fissure is releasing high levels of hydrogen sulfide. Professor Zilk's voice warned through the comm. Suits will provide limited protection, but prolonged exposure may compromise their integrity. We need to evacuate immediately. Mika scanned the area, her mind racing. The fissure was too wide to jump, and its edges were crumbling, making a direct approach dangerous. But to the west, where the fissure narrowed, she spotted a fallen rock formation that might serve as a natural bridge. This way, she said to Zixel, pointing. We can cross there and signal the others to follow. They changed direction, moving parallel to the fissure instead of toward it. As they approached the natural bridge, they heard a scream through the comm. Help! I'm slipping! It was Maz. He had attempted to descend into the fissure at a narrow point, perhaps thinking he could climb up the other side. But now he was clinging desperately to a ledge as the toxic gases swirled around him. Without hesitation, Mika changed course again, heading toward Maz's position. Zixel followed, though Mika could hear her rapid breathing through the comm. Maz, hold on, Mika called. We're coming to you. They reached the edge of the fissure and peered down. About 3 meters below, Maz clung to a narrow outcropping, his silvery skin dull with fear through his helmet visor. My suit is registering damage, he gasped. The gas is corroding the material. Mika looked around frantically for something to use as a rope. Finding nothing, she made a quick decision. Zixel, can you anchor me? I'm going down to get him. Zixel hesitated only briefly before positioning herself firmly, her 6 legs providing stability despite the awkward suit. I can hold you, but your suit will be exposed to the same corrosive elements. Earth's atmosphere used to have higher sulfur content from volcanic eruptions, Mika said, already lowering herself over the edge. Humans evolved with some resistance to sulfur compounds. I'll be okay for a short exposure. That wasn't entirely accurate. Mika would be just as vulnerable as anyone else if her suit failed completely, but she needed to project confidence. She descended carefully, finding handholds in the rocky wall of the fissure, until she reached Maz. "Grab onto me," she instructed. "Around my shoulders. I'll climb us out." Maz looked at her with wide, frightened eyes. "You can't support my weight in this gravity. Earth has higher gravity than this moon." Mika reminded him. "I'm stronger than I look. Trust me." Reluctantly, Maz loosened one hand from the ledge and gripped Mika's shoulder. Then, with a desperate lunge, he released his other hand and clung to her. Mika grunted as his weight settled onto her, but she maintained her position. "Okay, I'm going to climb now," she said, forcing steadiness into her voice despite her racing heart. "Just hold on." The ascent was grueling. Every movement had to be carefully considered, every handhold tested before she trusted it with their combined weight. Below them, the concentration of toxic gas was increasing, creating a yellow haze that limited visibility. When they finally reached the top, Zixel helped pull them over the edge. All three collapsed onto solid ground, breathing heavily. "We need to move," Mika said after a moment, checking the integrity indicator on her suit. It showed yellow warnings, not critical yet, but concerning. "The natural bridge is our best option." They helped Maz to his feet and made their way to the fallen rock formation Mika had spotted earlier. By now, other student pairs had seen them and were converging on the same location. The natural bridge was narrower than it had appeared from a distance, and it trembled with each new seismic event. Mika went first, testing each step before committing her weight. "One at a time," she called back to the others. "Move quickly but carefully." She made it across and turned to guide the others. Zixel came next, her multiple legs providing better balance than Mika had expected. Then Maz and the remaining students crossed one by one. As the last student reached safety, a violent tremor shook the plateau. The natural bridge shifted, then collapsed into the widening fissure with a tremendous crash. "Everyone make for the shuttle." Professor Zilk's voice commanded through the comm. "Geological activity is approaching critical levels." They ran the remaining distance to the shuttle, helping each other over the increasingly broken terrain. Mika found herself supporting one of the gaseous species, whose containment suit had been damaged, causing them to lose cohesion. She carried the portable containment unit in her arms, careful to keep it upright despite the rough journey. When they finally reached the shuttle, Professor Zilk's skin was pulsing with anxiety, rapid flashes of red and orange beneath his environmental suit. "Quickly, aboard," he urged, counting students as they entered the craft. Once everyone was inside and the airlock had cycled, they removed their helmets, revealing faces tight with fear and exertion. "Is anyone injured?" Professor Zilk asked, his skin now settling into a concerned purple. There were minor injuries, bruises, strains, one small laceration, but nothing life-threatening. The damaged containment suit was the most serious issue, and two students with engineering backgrounds immediately set to work repairing it. As the shuttle lifted off, cutting through Lunex 3's turbulent atmosphere, a strange silence fell over the group. Mika found herself the center of attention, with students staring at her with new expressions, not fear or curiosity, but something approaching respect. Maz was the first to speak. "You saved my life," he said simply. "You risked your own safety for mine." Mika shrugged uncomfortably. Anyone would have done the same. No, Zixel interjected, her mandibles clicking decisively. They would not. I observed the others. They hesitated. You did not. That's just human nature. Mika tried to explain. We're hardwired to respond to emergencies. It's not special. Perhaps that is what your professor failed to emphasize in his lecture, said a student Mika recognized as a Jovian, a being evolved from the atmospheric layers of a gas giant. That the same adaptations that make humans dangerous also make them protective. Professor Zilk had been quiet, monitoring the shuttle's systems, but now he turned to face the group. His skin had taken on a thoughtful blue hue. Student Hargreaves, he said formally, your actions today exemplified the highest standards of the Academy. You demonstrated quick thinking, physical capability, and most notably, concern for your fellow students that transcended species boundaries. Mika wasn't sure how to respond. This was the most positive thing Professor Zilk had ever said to her. Thank you, Professor, she managed finally. But I still maintain that what you saw wasn't because I'm from a Deathworld. It's because I'm a person who cares about other people, just like students from any world would. Perhaps, Professor Zilk conceded, his skin shifting to a contemplative green. Perhaps our understanding of Deathworld species has been incomplete. The journey back to the Academy was subdued but noticeably less tense than the outward trip. Students who had never spoken to Mika before asked her questions about Earth, about human emergency response training, about her experiences in hostile environments. For the first time, the questions didn't feel like she was being treated as a specimen, but as a person with valuable knowledge to share. When they arrived at the Academy, news of the expedition's dangers and their narrow escape had already spread. A small crowd had gathered in the shuttle bay, including the Academy's director, an ancient Arcturian whose translucent body seemed to contain swirling galaxies. Professor Zilk has informed me of today's events, the director announced as the expedition team disembarked. While the geological instability was unexpected and concerning, the response of our students was exemplary. Particularly, I wish to recognize student Mika Hargreaves, whose quick action and leadership ensured the safe return of all expedition members. Mika felt her face flush with embarrassment as attention turned to her once more. In light of today's events, the director continued, I am authorizing an expansion of our curriculum on Class 12 planetary species, with a focus on cooperative behaviors and problem-solving adaptations rather than merely survival traits. Student Hargreaves, we would value your input on this curriculum development. I would be honored, Mika replied, surprised and touched by the recognition. Later that evening, as Mika sat in her dormitory room updating her journal, Zixel entered. The arachnoid moved to her own side of the room, but then paused, seeming to struggle with something. I wish to apologize, she said finally, her mandibles clicking softly. I requested a different roommate when I learned I would be sharing quarters with a human. I based this request on prejudice and fear, not on knowledge or experience. Mika looked up, startled. You don't need to apologize. I do, Zixel insisted. Today, you demonstrated qualities I had not associated with Deathworld species. Compassion, self-sacrifice, concern for others, different from yourself. These are traits valued in my culture, yet I failed to consider that they might exist in yours as well. Mika smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with Earth's higher baseline temperature. Thank you, Zixel. That means a lot to me. I have been researching your planet since our return, Zixel continued, her multiple eyes blinking in sequence. It is indeed as dangerous as our textbooks claim. Yet its inhabitants have created art, music, literature. You have explored your own solar system. You care for your young and your elderly. You mourn your dead. We're just people, Mika said simply. Different in some ways, the same in others. Zixel's mandibles clicked in what Mika now recognized as thoughtful consideration. Perhaps that is the lesson. That personhood transcends planetary origin. I think you've just summarized what I've been trying to say since I arrived here. Mika laughed. Then I am glad I finally understood, Zixel replied, and Mika thought she detected a note of humor in the arachnoid's voice. In the weeks that followed, Mika noticed a shift in the Academy's atmosphere, or at least in how others interacted with her. The fearful avoidance had largely disappeared, replaced by genuine curiosity and, in some cases, friendship. She was invited to study groups, included in social gatherings, even asked to join the Academy's Xenobiology Club. Professor Zilk approached her after class one day, his skin a humble shade of violet that Mika had never seen him display before. "Student Hargreaves, I wish to invite you to give a presentation to the Xenobiology Department on the adaptive behaviors of humans in extreme environments, not as specimens, but as a spacefaring species with unique perspectives to offer the galactic community." "I'd like that," Mika said, already thinking of how to structure such a presentation. "But I want to focus on how Earth's challenges shaped not just our survival instincts, but our creativity, our empathy, our drive to explore and connect. I would expect nothing less." Professor Zilk replied, his skin brightening to an approving blue. "The director has also approved an expanded program for human students. You have opened a door that many more from Earth may now walk through." The day of her presentation arrived, and Mika stood before a packed lecture hall. Students and faculty from across the Academy had come to hear her speak. On the front row sat Zixel, Maz, and the other members of the Lunex 3 expedition team. Mika took a deep breath and activated the holographic display. Earth appeared above her head, beautiful and blue, just as it had in Professor Zilk's lecture weeks before. But this time, the narrative would be different. "Earth is classified as a death world," she began, "and that classification isn't wrong. Our planet has extreme temperature variations, powerful natural disasters, diverse predators, and countless microorganisms that can cause disease. Humans evolved in this challenging environment, developing physical adaptations that helped us survive." The display showed humans in various environments, climbing mountains, diving in oceans, traversing deserts, building shelters in frozen landscapes. But what truly sets humans apart isn't our physical resilience. Mika continued, "It's how our environment shaped our minds and our societies. The challenges of Earth didn't just make us strong. They made us innovative, cooperative, and adaptable." The display shifted to show early human settlements, then growing cities, then modern Earth with its blend of technology and natural spaces. Facing predators taught us to work together for mutual protection. Unpredictable weather led us to create shelters and share resources. Disease drove us to develop medicine and care for one another. Every challenge became an opportunity not just to survive, but to thrive through intelligence and cooperation. For the next hour, Mika shared stories of Earth, its dangers, yes, but also its beauty and the ways it had shaped human culture. She talked about how mountain ranges had inspired art, how oceans had birthed exploration, how the very forces that threatened humanity had also pushed them to achieve remarkable things. When she finished, the lecture hall was silent for a moment. Then, starting with Maz and spreading through the crowd, a wave of approval manifested in the various ways each species expressed appreciation: flashing skin patterns, raised appendages, harmonic humming, bioluminescent displays. Professor Zilk approached the podium, his skin glowing with a warm orange that Mika had come to recognize as sincere admiration. "Thank you, Student Hargreaves," he said, addressing both Mika and the audience. "Today's presentation exemplifies why the Galactic Preparatory Academy exists, to foster understanding across species boundaries, to challenge our preconceptions, and to prepare the next generation for a more inclusive galactic society." He turned to Mika. "You have taught us that a death world is also a world of life, of adaptation, of possibility. And you have shown us that its inhabitants deserve to be seen not as curiosities or threats, but as valued members of our galactic community." As the audience dispersed, Mika was surrounded by students eager to ask questions or simply to express their appreciation. For the first time since arriving at the academy, she felt truly seen, not as a death world monster, but as herself. Later, as she walked back to her dormitory under the violet sky of Centauri Prime, Mika reflected on how far she had come. She had arrived as an outsider, a curiosity, a representative of a planet feared and misunderstood. She would continue as a student, yes, but also as a teacher, a bridge between worlds. Earth would always be a death world in the technical classification. Its gravity would always be higher, its weather more extreme, its biosphere more competitive than most inhabited planets. But Mika had helped her fellow students see beyond the classification to the rich reality beneath. And in doing so, she had found her place in the stars. The following semester, 3 more human students arrived at the Galactic Preparatory Academy. Mika was there to greet them as they stepped off the transport, their faces showing the same mix of wonder and apprehension she had felt upon her arrival. "Welcome to the Academy," she said, extending her hand in the traditional human greeting. "You're going to love it here." And as she led them through the gleaming corridors, pointing out the xenobiology department where Professor Zilk was now teaching a course on cooperative adaptations in extreme environments, Mika knew that they would face challenges, misunderstandings, and moments of doubt, but they would also find friendship, knowledge, and acceptance. After all, they were humans. Adapting was what they did best.